I'm going to say something here that's really that's important that I wasn't going to say on here because he's a friend, and I know he's a friend of yours too. But I think Michael Saylor is wrong here on it just being a store of value.
This conversation with Brunell and Booth was over 9 months ago, and I can't help but see a bit of foreshadowing in his words. We're going to revisit a particular segment of this conversation that highlights a necessary step towards real Bitcoin adoption, and also call out a certain class of Bitcoiner that has seemingly dropped the ball. It's Sir Ulric, and are you down with the underground? Now, did you survive tax season? Therapy sessions on the regular right here. If you find our content intriguing, drop a sub, for the sake of your mental health. Now, the next 6 months are going to be cycle defining regardless of what happens to the price. And if you didn't know, I'm convinced this year the market peak should be between April 19th and October 21st. And I talk about why those dates are important in this video. Cue that one up to learn more. Now, if you don't give Bitcoin a chance to prove itself now, then you set yourself up to watch on the sideline and regret for overthinking. But this brings me to why I think this cycle has been and will continue to be relatively underwhelming to past performance. And I think it's the fault of the new so-called Bitcoiners, and I'm talking directly to the class of 2024. Now, let me explain. Can we all agree that every group with skin in the game treats Bitcoin differently? But I'm not talking about an annual class like when you bought your first sats. Rather, why do you still have them? First, there are the classic hodlers, and they ain't selling no matter what. And this cycle is just for information and bragging rights. When the bear market comes, they'll say, good, cheaper sats. They make the hard bedrock of Bitcoin's floor price, and it can't go anywhere near zero because of these people. Then there are the short-term hodlers who have held for a period and are ready for some significant purchases. And they're trying to time the market right. Maybe they're dollar cost average selling, maybe they have a sell order at a certain threshold, and they're hoping to capitalize on a traditional blow off the top, assuming it didn't already happen. And of course, the retail traders are always there. Some trade Bitcoin to get more dollars, some trade Bitcoin to get more Bitcoin. And they're not the same, but both will execute their skills and luck to attempt to create value for themselves. But these new participants that primarily buy ETFs or gain exposure via MicroStrategy or mining companies, they don't see the fiat system as toxic. Rather, they see Bitcoin as an extension of it. If you have this perspective, it's not an entirely different monetary system. You don't even see Bitcoin as a hedge against inflation. You see Bitcoin as a barometer for systemic health. Consequently, due to the vast amount of Bitcoins not only purchased, but active on the market from people with this outlook, Bitcoin's performance is evolving to reflect this very thing. Now, you want some proof? Go ahead and look at the inflows and outflows for the ETFs. It's been coupled with the price and performance of the S&P 500. But Bitcoin was not always like that. Case in point, remember March of 2023 when a few banks imploded, Silicon Valley Bank, Signature Bank, Silvergate Bank, and they were particularly tied to crypto projects and the FTX failing a few months before. Bitcoin ended that week, March 10th to March 17th, up 25%. It essentially kicked off the long bull market. Now, I would bet right now that if some famous bank went upside down and the state didn't save it, Bitcoin would take a quick dive as well. Now, I'm not selling, you're not selling, but that ETF group, the majority of the class of 2024 that auto sells everything categorized as a risk-on asset when foundations of the fiat scam are shaken up, yeah, they are selling. So tell me you see it, right? With this group, Bitcoin is a bonus investment. And if you were to force them to part with a particular asset, their investment properties, equities, their bonds, or Bitcoin, they would probably sell off their Bitcoin first. So here's what I'm trying to say. When you have this community of Bitcoin advocates, popular Bitcoin advocates going off the rails for an entire cycle, 4 years, petitioning high net worth individuals, ultra high net worth individuals to add it to their portfolio, quote unquote, your output is going to be a class of low conviction. There's no way around it. And on this show, I don't normally call out names with the exception of mainstream media characters like Michael Saylor or politicians. But what happens when you have James Lavish, Lawrence Lepard, Jeff Ross, Dave Foley, Max Kaiser's company Swan Bitcoin, or Peter Dunworth and his company, and you have them leading the charge for Bitcoin adoption this cycle? Is commonly accepted these people were making big moves, big statements this cycle. And their incentives have them appeal to their influence base and their sales leads. You can't outright blame them for anything that happens because they're acting out in their best interest. At the end of the day, they're salesmen. By the way, I know a few of these people that I mentioned before, and they've been kind to me. So it's not to discredit them or their passion, but let's think about this for a minute. Their target audience, at the end of the day, they don't need Bitcoin. Bitcoin isn't a critical solution for the wealthy because they already have access to any number of capital assets to hide their net worth from central bank monetary policies that continually weaken the local currency. Bitcoin is optimized for people who can't afford multiple homes or even a single home, people who need better liquidity in bonds, who don't have the information or time to maintain positive alpha and equities. It's supposed to give regular people a chance. And as long as legacy asset owners are the majority of new adopters, Bitcoin will evolve to be another toy for the wealthy. And this dilutes the importance of Bitcoin's use cases and alienates the less affluent demographics. Overall, it just slows the process of meaningful worldwide adoption. And I think we're experiencing that right now. If we're honest regarding Bitcoin's holistic use case scenario, the people that need to hear the message, the orange pill message, will buy and rapidly increase the real adoption floor as it's a critical element to regular people's asset profile.
The thing is, like, this whole medium exchange thing, I've never understood. I understand that if you take Econ 101, you're taught that money has to be a medium exchange, a unit of account, and a store of value. There's this kind of theology of it. That's what money is. But to me, empirically, that's not true at all. In fact, Friedrich Hayek, in The Denationalization of Money, a great book that everyone should read, you can download it for free off the internet. He talks about how different kinds of money have different amounts or degrees of each of these characteristics. Some forms of money are widely used as a medium of exchange, but they're not great stores of value. I think that's what I would say about the US dollar. Bitcoin, not really a great medium of exchange today, but a great store of value, the best store of value. And what is it that we're really missing in the world today, in the fiat world of today? It's store of value, right? Because every fiat currency degrades over time. And so what we really needed, we didn't need another medium of exchange. We've got plenty of those. What we really needed was a better store of value, and that's what Bitcoin provided for us.
And this is what's missing in the current popular narrative for why should you buy Bitcoin. But I shouldn't say missing, I would say muted or subverted. Now we know it doesn't benefit Michael Saylor or Larry Fink to promote the medium of exchange use case for Bitcoin, so they don't. But others will join that cause because of their own incentives, because of sales commissions, because of strategic partnerships. And then you have the social influencers that don't have any job whatsoever except for collecting likes and discovering that, hey, replicating Michael Saylor and echoing his abbreviated Bitcoin narrative is actually good for engagement. Revolution be damned.
You describe more. I mean, because I see a world where, especially at the beginning, fiat and Bitcoin coexist, and fiat can actually help Bitcoin in many ways. And as those rails collide, maybe we do eventually move to a Bitcoin standard, but I don't think that can happen very quickly. And I think people will want to spend their depreciating fiat, and it's almost more convenient. And, different countries will want to issue that and collect taxes in fiat, but the store of value being maybe the more important property.
It only takes a few years for someone to change their entire worldview. In 2021, an advocate could say Bitcoin is freedom money, but in 24, the same person will spend all their time discussing why a company should borrow endless cash to create a Bitcoin bond. Bitcoin went from Austrian economics hard money to a death spiral fiat trick. So who lost the plot? Well, almost anyone who is vying for your attention. So what should you do about all this? Well, let me tell you a story. In the 2020-21 bull phase, there were no coin people in the greater Los Angeles area of all places with opinions and energy regarding Bitcoin. Regular working people, some decided to buy and some didn't, but they were paying attention. And a whole cycle passes, a few mainstream psyops took place, and by the time Bitcoin is ready for another bullish cycle, these bullish headlines, no one seems to care. The class of 2024 is clearly strangled by fiat incentives and institutional monetization of volatility. If Bitcoin is legitimate, long-lasting adoption that can't be stopped is going to happen, but it needs to come from you talking to your neighbor and helping them understand how to use Bitcoin in as many ways as you know. And your job ain't done until they can teach someone just as you taught them. Rinse and repeat. And you can almost call this Bitcoin discipleship. And if you want this to work, Michael Saylor cannot be your high priest. And the people who are his supposed zealots and his allies that are preaching Saylorisms and fawning over everything he does, you need to keep them away from your people as much as possible, lest you have your planted seeds fall on thorny soil. And speaking of which, check out this whole clip I based this video on of Jeff Booth, only edited to remove pauses, explaining the importance of a more holistic and intact Bitcoin message. To partition Bitcoin is to destroy it.
Is Bitcoin a store of value or a currency or a network?
It's a protocol. Layer 1 is a protocol bounded by energy, and that's what you're calling the store of value. Layer 2 and layer 3 in Lightning and Fediment are turning into a currency and a payment mechanism. And again, I'm gonna say something here that's important that I wasn't going to say on here because he's a friend, and I know he's a friend of yours too. But I think Michael Saylor is wrong here on it just being a store of value. And if he's right on it just being a store of value, then what it means is all that happened is U.S. went from gold to an oil-backed currency, the petrodollar system, to Bitcoin. And if that's all it looks like, and it doesn't become a medium of exchange, then it will be manipulated and it be suppressed so that the theft can go on.
Can you describe more? I mean, because I see a world where, especially at the beginning, fiat and Bitcoin coexist, and fiat can actually help Bitcoin in many ways. And as those rails collide, maybe we do eventually move to a Bitcoin standard, but I don't think that can happen very quickly. And I think people will want to spend their depreciating fiat, and it's almost more convenient. And, different countries will want to issue that and collect taxes in fiat, but the store of value being maybe the more important property of Bitcoin.
So I'm going to go from a different way. And if you knew that the entire history of the world had to control money, and that base of money was extractive to 8 billion people, right? That's the world we've always lived in to get to this point. And what that would say is really simply, if I could steal a little bit of money from people over time and they didn't notice, then I could create an empire in doing so. So we know the entire state of the world has always looked like that. And then Bitcoin came in on layer 1 and removed the ability to do that. And all of the attacks on Bitcoin over the last 15 years have all been trying to stop it. And it only gets stronger and stronger and more decentralized and more secure over time. So if you knew that from that, then you couldn't stop layer 1, then you would have to stop layer 2. You'd have to. And what that would look like is stable coins. That would look like is we're going to make US dollar transact on top of this, stable coins, and we would move essentially from the petrodollar, gold backed, petrodollar to Bitcoin backed. But then we could suppress its price because people were using a different medium of exchange on top of it, and we could run derivatives and constantly hold its price down like we did to gold. right? And what would that look like from it? What would not might happen? What would have to happen to essentially say that, because if it moved out as a currency, as more and more people use it, then it would remove the ability to steal. But when I say theft, I want to be careful. It's not that there's a whole bunch of people manipulating the theft to say and everybody involved in it. But we know that natural state of the free market is deflation. And we also must concur that anything else is trying to stop that deflation. And so if you now created a stable coin or a use of US dollar because more people see value in the dollar, I'm not saying people wouldn't be tricked by it. I'm saying they would be tricked by it. They would use a US dollar all over the world because they see it more valuable than their own currency. But it would also be, because all a stable coin is something that is guaranteed to lose money at the same rate as the US dollar, right? Against Bitcoin. So these systems are incompatible. One is the free market, prices fall. One is stealing more of your time and money. And so now through that lens, if you were trying to stop Bitcoin at layer 2, what would you do? Right? I know what I would do. I would make stable coins legal. I would try to slow down self-custodial. I would create ETFs so people didn't hold in on their own wallet. And I would try to slow down the building in Lightning and Fediment and everything else that were native to Bitcoin. I would promote a whole bunch of other altcoins or bridges to be able to create confusion in what's happening. So through that lens, you could see this coming a mile away.